the vocabulary words. So the main shapes that we're going to look at are from the textbook, but there are other shapes on Math is Fun, but these are the primary ones that you're probably going to get on a test. So like we said yesterday, the cylinder is just a circle that has height. So it's going to be two circles, one at the top, one at the bottom, and we said it's kind of like a soup can, or maybe like a roll of toilet tissue, or anything that would be a flat circle at first, and then just adding the height to it. The name for that is a cylinder. And then a prism is what we were talking about, like a box, a triangular prism or a rectangular prism. So this is a solid with two bases that are congruent. So what I think of when I think of prisms, which we're gonna look at on Math is Fun, it's kind of like when you go to the deli and you're gonna buy like cheese or something, they pull out the circular, the cylinder style, but every slice that they make is a circle. So that cross section tells you what the actual base shape was. But you could have it in a triangle shape, you could have it in a square, you could have it in a rectangle, and the only thing that's making it a prism is that it is has height, even if it seems like it's laying down on one of the sides. So the other shape they talk about is a pyramid, and that has a square base with some triangle faces that meet at a vertex that's coming to the point, and then a sphere, which is the solid, you know, like a ball or a balloon or, you know, the globe or something like that. So the new formulas that we're going to look at are volume, which I think we talked about this one already. They're showing you a rectangular prism, and they're just saying volume is length times the width times the height. So I think when we were talking about this yesterday, we were saying the best thing to do is memorize some of the two-dimensional shapes, because when you get to three-dimensional, it's really just about adding the height. So in this first example, it's just saying Anastasia is buying a gift box with a length of 11 inches, a width of 6 inches, and a height of 4 inches. What is the volume of the box? So you're just saying 11 times 6 times 4. So this is one of the ones where we're saying it's going to be pretty easy if you get this kind of a question. The only thing now is that we're doing cubed. So if you can see down at the bottom, it says the volume of the box is 264 cubic inches, because now you're talking about something that's 3D. And you might get one of those questions like we saw on two-dimensional shapes. Should it be cubic or square inches? And you're just now thinking of flat surface versus volume. So here, this is mentioning the shading is not so good because this is a scan, but surface area is the part that you're thinking that you would have to paint. So like this is saying you're gonna do the top and the bottom, the front and the back, and the left and the right. So this would be like a tote, and you're trying to decide what is the surface area of the prism. So these, you just have to take a look at it like it is 6 different flat surfaces, and then just add them all up. So you're basically doing the area of all of the flat surfaces and then adding them. So what they're showing you is if you're looking at the front right here, it's 3 by 2. So that means the front is going to be 6 and the back is going to be 6. If you're looking at the left side, you're looking at 4 and then by 3. So now you're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, 4 by 2. Now you're going to say that the left and the right are 8. So if you have to paint something, you're really just trying to look at each individual face of whatever the shape is, and that's how you're going to find out the surface area. So this is what we're going to start with today, is just rectangular prisms. So on Math is Fun, it's talking about what we just said. You know, there's going to be surface area or volume. It's telling you that the prism has identical ends. So this one would be a pentagon. But what it's saying is that basically this is the shape, and then you added some depth, which we're saying is height. And they're kind of using like the deli idea by showing you a knife and saying that the cross section is how you're going to see what shape it actually is. So like for this one, it's a triangle. If you play this button, you're seeing that they're kind of giving you depth, but the idea is that if the shape was laying on the triangle, then it would be considered height. So when we look at the formulas a lot of times, it just has H in the formula, even if you're thinking of it laying on the height part, if that makes any sense. So sometimes when you're looking at something like this is a rectangle on the bottom for feeling like it's just some depth, like everything is laying on a shelf at the deli. But really you could, if you spin this around in your imagination, you can just imagine it laying on the triangle part and that you're getting more and more height with it. So what they're showing here is that idea of the prism laying on the shape that is the cross section. So if you were to imagine like it going through a slicer, you're gonna keep getting this same shape over and over and over. So we are not doing the curves yet, which would be cylinder or sphere. We're just sticking with the prism so far. And this is just telling you that the bases are the same because they should be identical because all you're doing is adding height to the same base that you started with. Now coming down, they're just talking about different kinds of prisms. So it's all based on the cross section or what the slice would be. So you can have a square prism, which means when you slice it, it would be a square. You could have a cube, which is now not rectangular, but still when you slice it, it's going to be a square. So this is why the two-dimensional shapes are the most important because you're coming back to these basic cross sections. Now they have the triangular prism. The cross section is just the triangle when you slice it. They've got the pentagonal prism. The cross section is going to be a pentagon. And then however many shapes you might be looking at, adding the height is what's making it a prism. So coming down a little bit more, they're starting to talk about the formula for surface area. So if you're looking at this one, this is a triangular prism. What you're really saying is in order to get the surface area, you have to multiply the base by 2. So here you're saying, here's a triangle. We already know, excuse me, how to find the area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. So when you do that surface area, you're remembering that there's one at the bottom and one at the top. And then you also have to say that here is a rectangle, here is a rectangle, and there's a rectangle on the bottom. So what they're saying is to do the surface area is basically adding it up, kind of like perimeter in a way, but you're adding up all of the areas. So this is 2 of whatever the base area is, plus the base perimeter times the length. So when they're saying this base perimeter is what they mean, times the length is how you're going to get the surface area at the bottom. So there's an example. What is the surface area of a prism where the base area is 25 square meters, the base perimeter is 24, and the length is 12? If you always stick with the formula, you're just going to do the replacing like they did, and then it becomes the order of operations. So you're going to do the multiplication first with 2 times 25 and 24 times 12, and then you're doing the addition last. So you're just remembering the order of operations. And then volume is the base area times the length. So what they're saying on Math is Fun, instead of length times width times height, they're saying that the length times width or the height times width would have been the base area. So they're just saying that you're adding the one thing, which is saying I already know the area and I'm adding more length. On the textbook, it says you have to know the area, like length times width, and add more height. So it's the same idea, but they're just using 2 different words. And we are going to pick, let's see, a cube. So on this, in the solids, you can do something similar that you did for the 2-dimensional shapes. You can do index cards if you want to, if you think it's necessary. Each one of the shapes does have its own page like this, where you get to kind of try to imagine a three-dimensional object to help you with your reading. So when you're doing the reading in math, you want to think of the image. If they say box or like a die or dice or a cube, you want to actually picture something because it's going to help you decide between area, volume, and surface area. So this one is a cube spinning around. It's saying it's got 6 faces. Each face has 4 edges and is a square. So it's just saying, you know, some of the ideas behind a cube. And you can hit for it to spin. You can hit for it to explode. So exploding is going to be pulling it apart to give you an idea of all of the different faces. And then they have like a 6-sided die or dice are cubes, right? They also have other words like polyhedron and hexahedron that you probably won't see on your test. More likely, they're just going to say prism or cube or, you know, triangular prism. They're also showing you all of the pieces if you had to separate the cube. And then this would be for surface area again. Like if you're putting together a box or putting together dice, these are the 6 sides that you actually would have to put together or paint. So in the cube, they're saying if you know one of them, then you're just multiplying by 6 because there's 6 sides. So for a cube, you're thinking of the fact that it is a square. This is saying that the edge length is 4. So what you're saying is, how would I get the area of the square if I know that the side is a 4? Because all the sides are the same, it's 4 times 4 or 4 squared. So once you know that it's 16, you're then going to multiply 16 times all 6 sides. And that's going to give you the 96. Then coming down for volume, you're saying that it's length times width times height. So because you know it's 4 cubed now. So 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So what I'm going to do is say that we're just going to start with the cube and the rectangle, or the cube and the rectangular prism, because that's kind of what we started with the 2-dimensional shapes. We started with the square and the rectangle. So this is now going to be the 3-dimensional square and rectangle. So I'm going to put this on the Google Classroom. But if you're already looking, this is what we're going to do for today, is just try out 10 questions for cube, 10 questions for rectangular prism. So this one is, what is the surface area? So what you have to do when you do Math is Fun is go back and forth in your mind between, are they asking me about the surface area, which is all 6 sides that I would paint, or are they asking me about the volume, which is length times width times height? So you just have to pay attention to the problem, because they might give you the same measurement and they're only changing the word, like this one. So last time it was surface area. For question number 3, it's saying volume. For question number 4, it's volume. Question number 5 is volume. Oops. And now let me show you the rectangle. So now this one is almost the same. It's saying what we just looked at was the cuboid, and it's saying that it's a box. But this one is just called a rectangular prism because it's not the perfect square. So the square is the cross section, but the depth or the length is not square. That's where the rectangular prism comes in. So this is examples of cuboids: a building, a box, a room, some model train boxes, and now here's another one that they're just saying is a drawing. Coming down a little bit more, they've got the same thing that's in the handout that's up on Google Classroom. When you're looking at the surface area, you're trying to see which sides match. So what you're going to do when you're figuring it all out, you're going to multiply, of course, to get length times width, but then you're going to say there's two of those because this in yellow is the top and the bottom. Then you have to think of what is the area of the side, but then once you multiply the length times the height, you're saying you're going to multiply that times 2 also because that's the left and the right. Then this one is the width and the height, but it's the front and the back. So you're gonna, once you figure out one of them, you're just gonna multiply it times 2. So really when you're doing something like this, you just have to figure out the 3 different sides that there are and double it, or figure out each one and double it as you're going. So this one is, there's a surface area for this cuboid. It's saying it's 10 by 4 by 5. So what you have to figure out is, I'm gonna do the 10 by 5. And then I'm going to multiply that by 2. I'm going to do the 4 by 5, and then I'm going to multiply that by 2. Now I'm also going to do the 4 by 10 and multiply that by 2. So you're just trying to make sure you account for all 6 sides. And it can be helpful to draw it out, or it can be helpful just to say, I did the 4 by 5, now I have the 4 by 10, and then I should also have the 10 by 5 to make sure that you've matched up all of the sides. Volume is pretty easy because it's just length times width times height. So we kind of talked about that for the square. It's the same thing for the rectangle. It's just that the numbers are going to be all 3 different numbers for a rectangle, where for a square, it ends up being like we saw 4 times 4 times 4. So if all of the sides are the same, it's the number cubed. For volume of a rectangle, it's length times width times height. But like we were saying yesterday, it just pays to memorize length times width times height. So if you really have to just say, I don't want to commit a lot of things to memory, it's easier just to stick with length times width times height and not worry about all of the differences between a square and a rectangle. So these are going to be the 2 quizzes that we're going to do, and then you can read the textbook for really tomorrow, and I'll just put on the 24th, like maybe we'll do 4 or 5 questions from the textbook. Today we'll be taking a look at Khan Academy and taking a look at study jams as the introduction, and I will just give like a longer due date for the Math is Fun, so that it's not too much at once. So if anything has to spill over to Monday, it'll probably be like the textbook. So I would say do the more interactive things today to get an understanding of what is volume, what is surface area. There's a few quick questions on Khan Academy, and then like we saw, there's 10 questions each on Math is Fun. So that's really probably enough for today and tomorrow, but I just wanted you to have the textbook too, in case you like to read that way or highlight the vocabulary and that type of thing. So now I want to ask if you have any questions.
Not today.
Not today.